After I made love to Haley Colton many times, I knew I knocked her up, but she didn't want to stop having sex with me like most women. Every time she saw me naked, she wanted to continue. I have been playing pro football for years, so naturally physically most women desired me sexually, and Haley Colton aka Autumn Night was no exception. She said, "Damn, you fuck good for a white boy," and I asked her, "Are you part Asian or something like that? I am just curious about that because you are very beautiful." And she said, "Yes, I am actually part Asian and black." And I said, "Interesting, you're gorgeous and I enjoyed having sex with you very much, but eventually we are going to have to stop having sex." And she said, "Damn, I'm hungry, could take me somewhere to get something to eat?" And I said, "Yes ma'am, I can do that right now if you wish." And she said, "Thank you, you wonderful gentleman." And I said, "Yes ma'am, I aim to please her if my name isn't Derrick Wright, because I'm the do-right man." And then I stood up and she saw my big flaccid penis and she said, "This is going to be really hard for me to fuck you every chance I get." And I said, "Careful honey, you might get pregnant by me." And she said, "I know, but I'm sure you can take care of me and the child probably." And I said, "Yes I can, but I'm not made of money, I have to earn just like everyone else, Haley." And she said, "I know, but I saw your car outside, what's that, a new model Prius?" And I said, "Yes ma'am, it's fuel efficient and I like cars that save money." And she said, "Oh honey, please, you don't need to save money." And I said, "Yes ma'am, I do, it's great to have good habits, you might want to remember that." And she asked me, "So does your wife Keyshawn know about your bad habits?" And I said, "I wouldn't exactly call it a bad habit. Having sex with beautiful women is a great habit to have, but yes ma'am, me and Keyshawn have an open relationship. I've even kind of fantasized about watching her have sex with other men, but honestly she might not ever cheat on me, I think, but even if she did I wouldn't have a problem with it. I'm a good man and I don't beat my wife and I support her and the baby loyally, and I enjoyed making love to her just like I did to you." And she said, "Honey, that was a great fucking, not just making love." And she said, "So can we please go get something to eat now? I need something after all this liquor I drank." And I said, "You should really stop drinking alcohol, Haley, because it doesn't make your problems go away, it just makes them worse than they already are." And then she said, "Whatever, fuck all that, just please take me somewhere to get me something to eat, white boy." And then I took her to a couple of places to get something to eat. I took her to an Asian buffet restaurant and then I took her somewhere nice to eat, and while we were at the nice steakhouse she said, "Damn, you really know how to be good to a girl." And I said, "I try ma'am." And she said, "Your daddy must have taught you some manners." And I said, "No, my father was an abusive asshole that liked to beat on my mother and me. I hated him and I still do. My father was a fucking loser, so please don't mention him again, it could offend me. But no, I knew I wanted to be better than he ever was, so I never beat on my wife." And I told the cops about my father. They locked him up in prison and he was killed in prison. He was shanked by 4 men in prison, but no one ever found out who ordered that hit. And I winked and she said, "That was you, wasn't it?" And I said, "No comment." And I said, "You see, I don't have to do anything to anyone. I'm playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, and I'm 10,000 steps ahead of everyone while everyone else is playing catch up. I mean, I was rich before I even went to college, and as long as I am alive I will always land on my own 2 feet. How about you, Haley Colton? Do you play chess? You seem like a smart lady." And then she said, "I haven't had a steak that good in a long time, so thanks, Derrick." And I said, "You're welcome, baby. My pleasure." And I said, "If you would like me to, I could take you to get your money now." And she said, "Really? Okay." And I said, "You just need to keep the baby and let me have it before you decide to leave." And she asked me, "How did you know I planned on leaving?" And I said, "Oh please, you got that look about you because you think running away will solve all your problems, but trust me, it won't, gorgeous." And she asked me, "So will you be at the club tonight?" And I said, "Of course I will." And then the next day Mercedes came to me asking for money for her dance studio, and I said, "Mercedes, why don't you sell what you are good at?" And she asked, "What am I good at?" And I also said, "If you don't know the answer to that, then you must be dumb, honey. What have you been doing since before I came along?" And her eyes widened in surprise and she said, "Stripping." And I said, "That's it, you got to sell people your skills as a stripper." And then she kissed me passionately and then she said, "I have something special planned for you later." And I said, "That sounds great."